Welcome back. I'm in the studio with gender activist researcher. She is with Vetten Institute for Social Economic Research, Lisa Vetten. Now, Lisa, I asked you to explain abuse in a much more detailed manner than just violence and the killings that we mentioned earlier on. But children also seem to be very much under increased attack, especially from people who are supposed to look after them, the authority figures that are supposed to look after them in schools. They get impregnated and they get kidnapped. There are all sorts of things that are going on in in most recent times, or maybe have been going on, but they're highlighted more recently. When we talk about abuse of children, again, if you can just tell me more about it, in the homes as well as where they have authority figures who abuse them.
I think when you have a home where there's domestic violence occurring and the mother is being assaulted, there's a very good chance that the children are being assaulted as well. So there can be physical violence, and there can also obviously be sexual assault, often of girls, but also of boys as well. And then, of course, there can be the neglect of children. That can be, if it's not physical, the emotional abuse, the emotional destruction of a child, the humiliation, the running down of them, and then just their neglect, failing to pay attention to them, failing to encourage them, to provide them with good support and assistance, and, of course, corporal punishment. There is a very fine line. I mean, I think corporal punishment does fit within physical abuse, and we really do need to be working with parents to help them think of other ways in which they can discipline or correct their children's conduct without having to hit them. Because I think you give a child a very confusing message when you hit them and you say, I'm only doing this because I love you. Because what that's telling the child is that people who love you also hurt you. That is not helpful when you become an adult, for instance. And so you will find, particularly so with girls, that is what love is for them, that the person who loves you also hurts you and harms you. That's the norm as a child, so that's what you put up with as an adult. So it's very important that parents think carefully about the messages that they are giving their children. And it's also really important that we give better support to parents. Bringing up children is not always easy. So it is important that we provide them with services and a range of good guidance in order to assist them when they're not coping, because every parent's going to have a time in their life where things might not be going well. There might be a relationship breaking down, the father may not be around, whatever it may be. So, and parents will need support at that point in time. I think with most forms of violence, there's an underlying power dynamic. So this is why you can see it in authority figures towards children, is because there is an abuse of that power. I'm the adult, you listen to me, you'll do what I tell you. And they rely on the fact that children, because it's an authority figure, will be too scared, or people won't believe them.
I appreciate what you say, especially in the home, but there's another area of concern with the case of the school children in Soweto who were abused by the school patroller, raped by the school the case in the Parktown Boys High School, where the coach, again implicated in that, the school, a case of this happening within the church and the churches, the Tim Omotosho case as an example. Just tell me more about this phenomenon. How does it happen that one individual can go on an abusing spree? Because it's not just one individual, it will be large numbers of children or young people who are abused in this manner.
There will be different reasons, but I think one of the things you want to look out for is those who, you have to look very carefully at people who want to work with children. Sometimes they do love children and have a real interest in them. Sometimes they want to work with children because of the access it's going to give them to children. So you need to watch very carefully and I think check the backgrounds of those who are coming in. And quite often, but not always, you will find that those particular individuals might themselves have had a history of childhood abuse. And without wanting to get too psychological, in some ways, one of the ways in which one responds to having been victimized is to victimize others. So that's why I think you have to look quite carefully at who you bring in to children. Some people, for instance, having felt humiliation and shame as a child, as an adult, may abuse children because it's a way of reenacting or working out that shame and humiliation that they felt themselves as a child. So that's why, again, it is very important to look at what happens to children and address it.
What does it say about us as a society and our value system as a people. We talk, as we said earlier on, about this, but you find that some of the abusers are shielded by their colleagues or
Yes.
people who know what they are up to. In most of the time,
Yes.
actually, they enjoy that protection.
Yes.
That's one part of the question. The second question is, from your research, what is going on in the way we think about abuse as a society in South Africa? Is there any particular reason that would make us more abusive or more violent towards the most vulnerable members of our society?
Those are very difficult and complicated questions, and I wish I had an answer to, a very clear answer to
I
them.
want you to have the answer so we can just sort it out once
Exactly.
and for all, and then we say from now on we don't need activism.
Exactly.
Yeah, but on a serious note though, yeah?
Okay. I think there is, as I've said a number of times, I think the persistent neglect of children and supporting their parents in order to be able to look after them properly. If you don't do that, you just keep on reproducing problems. And we have long histories of disrupted childhoods in South Africa that were very racially based. Migrant labour, lots of different men coming and going in homes. And unfortunately, that gives stepfathers access to young girls or boys whom they also would sexually abuse. So once you start that cycle, there is a tendency then to reproduce it, especially when you deny services and you don't give them in order to be able to disrupt it. We also have a very long history, not just here, but globally, of denying abuse. So, corporal punishment. Now we think it's a problem. 20 years ago, you couldn't run your classroom without it. It was thought indispensable to discipline. We have a legal history. For instance, that up until 1993 said it was not possible for a man to rape his wife. Once she'd married him, she'd given her consent permanently. So what's also going on is that things we took for granted that we thought were normal, we're questioning and we're shifting them now. So it's bringing to the fore things that 30, 40 years ago we would not have questioned, and where we would have engaged in that without question, and now we live with some of the legacy of that as well.
And I suppose in homes where there's no such experience, many people then become ignorant of the extent to which abuse is taking place in our society and rely on other institutions to provide the support. Now, when you look at the resources that are available in our society, to what extent do you think we're providing adequate support, whether it be government or it be the NGOs or it be any other organizations out there or individuals that might help those whose lives are under threat all the time?
Recently, the government commissioned an analysis of its responses, and it found that care and support was the area that it provided the least resourcing to. The policing and court is where most resourcing is going, followed by things like events like the 16 days, and then last on the list is care and support. You can also see that in our mental health services. They're probably the least funded part of the Department of Health, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, mental health issues are stigmatized. So people there haven't asked for it, they haven't demanded, because they are worried of being stigmatized about being mad. Counselling services are often seen as being soft, not really necessary, self-indulgent. There have also been questions of, have some of the model reviews always been culturally appropriate? Are there ways we can draw on more locally that might be more acceptable to greater proportions of the population to be able to help them? But I think if you also look at the Department of Social Development budgets, the victim empowerment budget, which is for this area of work, it nationally gets the second least amount of money. Some provinces it might be the third or fourth least, but nationally that's how low it is. So quite frankly, the 16 days we stand up and say wonderful things, but when you look at commitment in terms of money, which is how you measure how sincere we are, then no, I wouldn't say there is a real political will to addressing the consequences of violence, and that's also preventing them.
And in the South African context, again, the rural-urban divide is very important here, right? What is the comparison then?
It's very important. There are very few services in rural areas. What you do have is often less resource, because people keep forgetting that providing a service in a rural area costs more. You're having to pay more for transport, special fees for those who wish to, who think that because they work in a rural area they should earn more for the inconvenience of it, which I don't think is necessarily fair. So that is very much a great difficulty. So you have parts of the province, if you look at the Northern Cape, for instance, I was looking at mental health facilities there, they have almost no facilities. the Eastern Cape, they're falling apart. So there's a real need to, I think, do a proper mapping of what services are where, how many people need those services, what's the shortfall, what do we put in place. And for me it is astounding that 24 years after democracy we still cannot say how many shelters we need in South Africa.
And I was thinking about the victims who've been abused and potential victims. And I'm thinking about it that, you know, when we go through our lives and when we have children and women around us, that they are potential victims almost permanently, that's not the way to live, looking at things from the point of view of the potential victims, right? So what is it that we can do as a people, as society, as individuals to help empower victims as they are and potential victims? What is it that we need to know or they need to know?
And I think we should also look at the question of potential perpetrators.
Yes.
How do we address that? There are different things that can be done. I mean, some of the things that have been found to be helpful are parenting programs, helping parents deal with difficulties with their children so they don't respond violently. But how else can you deal with this? We can look at also programs in schools. Those have also been found to be fairly effective. We can look at programs that build the capacity of both men and women to be able to improve their livelihoods and to be able to increase their incomes, which helps reduce economic dependency, for instance, and might also make men feel less that women are taking away their jobs from them and therefore they're entitled to hit them, for example. So we've got evidence of programs that do those sorts of things that do work. We've also seen programs that, you know, where you try and work with both men and women around how do we change gender norms. We've also seen that those are effective. But again, unless you're willing to put money into them, unless you're willing to sit down and construct a proper plan as to who's responsible for this, what does it cost, who are the people we need, where we're going to find those people, we're just going to swing from 16 days to 16 days saying, oh gosh, what's changed since last year?
And point fingers at the government,
Exactly.
and the government can't come into homes to protect and look after our children. And it's not only just protecting children and women, but it's also making sure that, you know, the environment is conducive enough to lead safe and peaceful lives, right?
Exactly.
It's not okay to abuse anyone for any reason.
No, and I think we've seen enough about how serious the long-term consequences are. Rape, for example, produces a degree of post-traumatic stress disorder that is only exceeded by those who've experienced political torture in South Africa. So it gives you a sense of how serious the effects are. So it really concerns me that we don't put money.
I can tell you, I never really look forward to discussing these kinds of topics, but they are there simply because they make one feel sad and wonder what is wrong with us as a people, because it's something we can easily reverse. You don't need many prisons, you don't need courts necessarily, you just need a change of mindset and improved understanding of what's going on. Lisa, keep up the good work, and I appreciate that you made time to talk to us.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that's Lisa Vetten. She's a researcher and has been working with Vetten Institute for Social Economic Research for a long time on this subject, and you can tell she's passionate about it, but we all need to be aware and passionate about this matter. And we will continue with the program in a short while.